የሚቀጥለው ተናጋሪያችን ሮቤል ዓለሙ ይሆናል። የአማራ ንቅናቄ የወጣቱና የቤተሰብ ድርሻ በሚል ርዕስ ለ10 ደቂቃ ይናገርልናል። ሮቤል የአማራ ማህበር በአሜሪካ የኮሚኒኬሽን ዳይሬክተር ሆኖ የሚያገለግል ትንታግ ወጣት ነው። ብዙዎቹ ወጣቶች ያውቁታል፣ እኛም እናውቀዋለን። ሮቤል።
Thank you for the introduction, Getacho. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the organizers of this public forum, the International Amhara Movement, the Executive Committee, all the member organizations for the work to organize this, as well as other similar initiatives, which are at the forefront of organizing the diaspora movement in parallel to the movement on the ground in Ethiopia. So again, my name is Robel. I serve as Director of Communications for AAA. Apologies, I'm going to make this in English. As a diaspora, my Amarinya is not perfect, but again, just to make things easier, I'm going to do it in English. Thank you. So to talk about the role of the youth in advocacy, we have to start with the problem. What is the problem that we're dealing with? It's that Amharas as a community face an existential threat in Ethiopia. So this is members of the ethnic group, sometimes other people who are labeled as Amharas, who are hunted down and killed. And at the core of what we do is trying to stop this, what really is a genocide, an Amhara genocide. And so in order to stop this, the solution from the diaspora perspective is focusing on work around advocacy. And at AAA, we have this saying called Menkat, Mederajit, and Metagal. It's kind of our slogan. And that roughly translates to inform, organize, and struggle. And when we talk about these things, what do we mean? For inform, this is really about truth and facts. So among all of the problems, all of the unrest in Ethiopia, we have all of these issues. We have hate speech, incitement of violence, and repression. And the Amharas in particular are a group that have been scapegoated based on false narratives. And this goes back to the 1960s, to the 70s, where various political groups and so-called liberation fronts framed the Amhara people as oppressors that the rest of Ethiopians needed to fight back against. And unfortunately, some of these groups got significant followings. And in the 1990s, Amharas were systematically excluded from the process of the transition, which meant that there was a new constitution, a new federal order that was imposed on Ethiopia, and this process excluded Amharas. And so we now refer to the system as the ethnic federalism system and that constitution. And these are things that were weaponized against the Amhara people. So when we talk about informing, this really is about educating our communities, educating our people about what's been happening against our people. And this is a recurring issue because, and an evolving issue because there's lots of these political issues that actually turned into war and conflict. And again, when we talked about this genocide, we're looking at a genocide in the Oromia region, for example, of Ethiopia. We're talking about the recent war in northern Ethiopia, which started in November 2020 and spanned at least 2 years. And now supposedly it's ended, but there's also indications that it could restart easily. And so there's this, and then there's the current war against Amharas by the Abiy regime, by the ruling party. And so it's very important to highlight truth and facts and inform our community, as well as our neighbors, in our host communities who may not know too much about Ethiopia. And this is at the core of this advocacy work. And then next is organization. When we're talking about organizing, this is really about forming organizations at the grassroots level. And so, for example, we know the work that IAM has done and other organizations. And this is really very critical to bring our people together to effectively utilizing our resources and essentially bringing about a change that's more impactful as opposed to people operating as individuals. Whereas, when you have a group, an organization, you're more likely to be taken seriously as opposed to a single person. Okay, and so we talked about informing, organizing, and then there's the actual struggle itself. And when we talk about struggle, we're talking about Amhara resistance, or the Amhara struggle, essentially, which has gone back many years. And we saw, early grassroots resistance since 2016. Even before that, we saw large-scale protests in major cities in the Amhara region, in Gondar, Bahardar, Waldia, and many others. And then more recently, in recent years, we've seen very large-scale protests in Ethiopia. So in 2021, we had one that said Bakan. So the Amhara people said enough of the genocide, of the political repression, all of these things. In 2022, we had protests that were led by university students. So these are students, some of them being in their first year, second year, third year, who were at the forefront of organizing their communities on the ground in Ethiopia, facing the threats that they faced. And that was absolutely heroic of them. Many of them were jailed, they were abused. And students in Ethiopia continue to be at the forefront of bearing the risk, but also leading the resistance on the ground. And then as early as this year, in April 2023, we had historically one of the largest protests, not just in Ethiopian history, but possibly in Africa and even in world history, where people, millions of people, an estimated millions of people across the Amhara region protested against the Amhara genocide, against the displacement, demanding political representation in Ethiopia, protesting travel restrictions, demolitions of homes, and other abuses that were targeting Amhara people for their identity. And so we talked about informing, we talked about organizing, we talked about the struggle. And so now a lot of us have personal experiences, and really I'd like to share some of mine with you, because I've seen many inspirational stories of young people in my community and in other communities who have been at the forefront of organizing. So in my city, in Toronto, we've had young people who are very, very effectively involved in organizing protests. Last year, we had the I Am Fano protests that were worldwide. And in many cities, young people were at the forefront of helping to organize those protests to become successful. And not just protests, sometimes candlelight vigils outside the, where policymakers were, outside of media organizations, in large public areas across North America, across Europe, across Australia, and elsewhere, where they said, we're standing in solidarity with our people, with our Fano, our patriots on the ground in Ethiopia, who were facing persecution, who were facing targeting for not having committed any crime. So we said, I am Fano. And that was a really amazing experience to see all of the young people coming out with signs, speaking and educating their communities and leading their communities. And it's not just this, there's also other stories of young people involved with meetings with policymakers. So these could be elected officials. And this is actually a very important aspect of advocacy as well, because essentially it's important to ensure that those policymakers, the people who are shaping foreign policy in their respective countries, which are very influential in the global community, that they're presenting accurate information from our community, because at the end of the day, we know the issues better than a lot of the other people who are trying to cover Ethiopia, right? So some of the media organizations try, but they don't always get it right. So it's important for our people to disseminate the information in a way that's accurate. And this, again, this goes back to collecting facts. And then there's the social media angle. The social media now has become a big area for the exchange of information, to the point where now journalism, in fact, is under threat, because people on social media can actually report what's happening in real time. So people in Ethiopia, for example, can record what's happening on their phones, on their smartphones, upload it to Facebook, to Twitter, to TikTok, and then people around the world can see what's happening. And unfortunately, this has exposed a lot of very bad things. And it's also upset the oppressive regimes, because they get upset that now they can't do what they did in the past in the dark. So whatever they do gets exposed. But then again, the social media campaigns are necessary to actually make sure that that is known. So that's another very critical angle. And then there's even, I've seen involvement in media and charity work. And we've actually seen people delivering humanitarian aid to those in need on the ground. And this is a very huge issue. Before the war in northern Ethiopia, there was already a very terrible displacement crisis, with thousands of people, actually tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, displaced from their homes in their own country because they were displaced for their Amhara identity, because armed groups, some of them supported by the government, some of them maybe not, targeting these people and destroying their homes, massacring them, and all of these things. And that created a lot of displaced people who don't have access to shelter, to food, to water, to medicine, all of these things. So we've had young people involved in that charity work to actually support those people, and that's amazing as well. So all of these different areas are ways that people who have been involved in the past have made a difference, but also that for those of you who are listening to this public meeting, if you're asking yourself as a young person, what can I do to serve my community, to help my community, to get involved? These are all areas where you can contribute, and you can actually do so through the organizations. And really, it's about bridging the gap, because there's always this, we talk about as a generational gap, right? There's the veterans in the political sphere and the community organizing sphere who have been doing this for a long time, and they have a lot of experience. So they know, they've formed connections, they've formed networks, they know how to get things done. But sometimes the youth are the ones that are maybe a bit more energetic. They have the passion, they have the desire to do things. And so bridging that gap so that the two sides can work together is very critical to making sure that what we do is successful and has maximal impact. And so, our parents' generation also in the political situation, they talked about the problem with Ethiopian politics. It didn't start yesterday. It didn't start 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's been there for a long, long time. And it's really important now that we pass on that knowledge so that you guys, the young people, can then lead the organizations of tomorrow. Because one day, the people who are doing this incredible work are not going to be in a good place to do those things, and they're going to need the next generation to take over. And that's already happening. There's already, again, as I said, people doing all of these amazing things. So it's very important to do that. It's very important to foster mentorship, asking questions of people who are older, who are more experienced, and then even seeking out information on your own. And to be clear, you don't have to be an expert on Ethiopian history. You don't have to be an expert on the politics to get involved. There's very simple ways you can get involved, as I described earlier. And so you can join these organizations. If you don't find an organization in your city, you can start an organization. And this is where collectives such as I Am can help you by showing you the way, by giving you resources, by showing you what other groups have done. And then it's just a matter of bringing together a few people, sometimes more, in your local groups, and then registering those organizations. And then now you have an Amhara organization in your city as well. And right now our movement is growing at an amazing pace. We're more organized than we've ever been. And there's lots of very positive developments. Despite all the negative, there's lots of positive. And I think what's really critical is that we have to recognize that this is not a problem that's going to go away tomorrow. It's not going to go away the day after. It's going to be a long-term challenge. And so we as a people, have to be the backbone of that resistance. It can't be led by one person, by one organization. We need the engagement of the entire Amhara population. And we have to see that as part of it's like a civic duty. So when people tell you as your civic duty, you have to participate in your local politics, you have to vote, you have to make your voice heard. This is the same concept. You have a duty because without that, your people are under risk. They're under risk. You're at risk of a lot of things, terrible things happening on the ground. And, all of those things you've been told maybe by your parents about one day going back and retiring in Ethiopia, getting a nice place and maybe, working for some international organization. All of those dreams won't be possible if you don't have a country there, if your people are not safe. And so you need to be part of the solution. We have to see this as part of our collective duty. And ultimately, the future of Amhara is bright. There's no doubt about that. So I'd like to conclude there. Again, I'm Rebel from Amhara Association of America. You can follow our developments at www.amharaamerica.org. You can support some of our advocacy work and learn more by following us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. And you can also support financially. Thank you.
እንግዲህ እነዚህ አይነት ወጣቶች የታላቁ ቴዎድሮስ ተርፌ ፍሬዎች ናቸው። ቴዎድሮስ ተርፌ እንደነዚህ አይነት ወጣቶችን እየሰበሰበ ነው የአማራውን ትግል ወደሚቀጥለው ጄኔሬሽን እንዲተላለፍም የሚያደርገው። እንግዲህ ከዚህ ቀጥሎ የአየን ምክትል ፕሬዚዳንት አየን የዓለም አቀፍ የአማራ ንቅናቄ አይአም ምክትል ፕሬዚዳንት አቶ ቴዎድሮስ ትርፌ ዓለም አቀፍ የአማራው ንቅናቄ ከዲፕሎማሲ ጋር ወይም በዲፕሎማሲ ሊሰራ የሚገባውን ወይም እየሰራ ያለውን ሐሳብ ያቀርቡልናል። በአማርኛ እንደሚናገሩ ዛሬ ቃል ገብተውልኛል። ቴዎድሮስ ትርፌ
በጣም አመሰግናለሁ አቶ ጌታቸው። ገና ይቅርታ በእንግሊሽ ነው ዛሬ የምናገር፣ ግን አንድ ጊዜ በአማርኛ ስፒች አደርጋለሁ። እኔና ሮቤል ሁለታችን በአንድ ጊዜ እናደርገው እንችላለን። እንደ ወደ ሀገራችን ተመለስን። ጌታቸው, thank you for the introduction. It's really a challenge, to speak after so many people that I admire that can articulate our issues, but not only just articulate our issues very well, but also that can articulate the path of what we need to take in order for our people to be free from this oppression. So after Robel, after Professor Getachew Begasha, after Dr. Sennight, Haptamu Ayelo, Abebe Belau, Minilacho Simacho, what can I say, right? It's very challenging, to say something that on a topic that hasn't been touched. But it's really a sense of pride for me, to be here, to be amongst all these people. A few years ago, this would not have been possible. Just to be here, as one of the panelists, just one of the panelists next to all these individuals, really makes me proud and shows me how far we have come, within the Amhara movement. In such a very, very short period of time. And not only that, but it also gives, as Robel was saying, that's why I'm hopeful. That's why I'm optimistic. Talking about from my own personal experience, 7 years ago when we started, first the Amhara Association of America, FANA, we could not dream in 2016 of FANA. We could not dream of CASA in Canada. We could not dream of International Amara Movement, or IAM, now bringing together 47 Amara organizations across the globe under one umbrella organization. That's a very, very short period of time. The pace of the Amara movement is really incredible. And everyone here has contributed. All of these panelists has contributed to increasing our base within the Amhara movement. Everyone has, made it possible so that our people have hope in the face of a genocide. Instead of completely giving up, our people are standing up because of many of these leaders here in the diaspora, and also the leaders we have back home in Ethiopia saying, enough, Bakan, we're done. We're going to stand up for ourselves. We're going to depend for ourselves. We're going to stop this genocide, when we're going to have democracy in our country, and ensure that Amaras have a future, a very, very bright future. It is not unique for Amaras to go through this in our thousands years of history. It isn't. As a people and a civilization as old as ours, we will go through ups and downs. It's natural. There's, even in our own personal life, in your own personal life, you go through ups and downs. But when you go through that down period, you don't give up. You bring yourself up. You find people to help you through that, and you bring yourself up, and then you rise again. So, and that's what we need to do collectively as Amaras. Why do we have these Amara organizations? Because it's critically important to have Amara organizations, because it's the organizations that bring our people together, to unify our people. It's the organizations that bring our resources together. And it is the only way that we can take our people away from this oppression, this subjugation, this annihilation that our people are facing, into a community that thrives again, into a community that contributes to ourselves, that contributes to the greater Ethiopia, to the greater world. Amaras are renowned and well known across the globe. We're one of the oldest civilizations in the world. It's because of us, it's because of our fighting spirit that this country was never colonized. That fighting spirit is within us. You know, that's why you don't see anyone here, you know, depressed. You see people here you see all these leaders articulating the issues, but it's with a fighting spirit. Because why? We are in a struggle. We are in a fight right now. We are in a fight for survival. So it's really great to just be part of this leadership core where, you know, a few years ago, many people never thought that we would be here. And I'm proud to see that someone as Wilson Yitna now is at the helm of leading an umbrella organization with 47 Amara organizations that are under it. Think about that in a very short period of time to do that. How complex do you think it was, the process to bring 47 Amara organizations from the United States, Canada, Europe, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand, these leaders to come together to deliberate on the issues that our people face and realize that the best way and the only way for this genocide to stop, for this subjugation to stop, for this displacement to stop, is for all of us to come together as one. This notion that Amaras, do not work together, it was never true when it comes to Amara Civic Organization. This notion that Amaras do not know how to collaborate, this was never true when it comes to Amara Civic Organizations. We've been working together, collaborating for many, many, many years. That is why we have accomplished so much in such a short period of time. Obviously, we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. But the one thing is, we will never go backwards again. We will never give up on our Amara identity. It will be at the forefront. The most important and critical thing to us is the survival of our identity. That is primary, number one. That is not something that we will ever make secondary again. We will not put that to the backside. We have realized what happens when you do that. It's a genocide. We will not negotiate our identity. We will not negotiate our culture. We will not negotiate our history to appease anyone anymore. Now, I'm not going to, go back and talk about what our issues are. Dr. Sennight has done that. Professor Getachew Bugashaw has done that. Robert has done that. Haptamu Ayelo has done that. Minilacho Simacho has done that. Wilson has done that. Abebe has done that. And you all know it. All of you know it. You read, you watch the news. Many of the media journalists that you watch are here today. You read about it. You're active. You're engaged in it. But what should you be doing? What can you do right now? What can you do to stop this genocide? What can you do to stop this displacement? What can you do to make sure justice prevails? That all of our people, the millions that we have lost, that they get the justice that they deserve. That the perpetrators, Abiy Ahmed, TPLF, Bahadin, the Oromo Liberation Army, all of these people are held accountable. If we come together, we can do this. Now, right now, where the Amara movement is, there is a place for you within the Amara movement. There is an organization that you can join. Wherever you might be, there is an organization. If there is a place in this world where there's not an Amara organization, you can establish one. It does not take a lot of people. AAA, the Amara Association of America, was established in Charlotte, North Carolina. Many of you probably have never heard of Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a small community here in the United States relative to many other communities. But we were determined to establish an organization to advocate for the Amhara people. And now, within a very short period of time, that organization, the Amara Association of America, has become a global brand. That organization is a founding member of Federation of Amaras in North America, an umbrella organization for 16 Amara organizations here in the US. It's a founding member of IAM. It's something that I am very, very proud of. So, but we're not a large community. So wherever you are, if you don't have an Amara organization that you can be a part of, establish one, as Robel was saying earlier. It's critical, bring your resources together. And then join one of these umbrella organizations. So you can start with that. Second, contribute and support these Amara organizations. These Amara organizations need your financial support. These Amara organizations need you to volunteer. These Amara organizations need you to actively support them, especially the leaders. All of these leaders that you see here before you, and many other leaders that are not here, are volunteers. I'm a volunteer for AAA. I don't work for AAA, or for FANA, or for IAM. I'm the VP of IAM. I'm a volunteer. I give my time. Why? Because I'm an optimist. Because I believe the future of Amaras is bright. And I want to be part of that. And why are all these leaders here? Because they are all optimists, because they know the future of Amaras is bright, because they're contributing to it. They see the difference that they're making. So support your Amara organizations. We need your financial support. We need your skills. We need your experience. We need you to attend these meetings. Amara organizations are holding fundraisers across the globe to support our people. They're working hard. I was a few weeks ago in Los Angeles, California, for a fundraiser. I'll be going to Oakland, California, returning again for a fundraiser. Dr. Sendai was in Seattle. Wasan Yitna was in Toronto for a fundraiser. Amara organizations across the globe are having fundraisers to support the humanitarian needs of our people in Ethiopia, to also increase the capacity of these organizations. Amara organizations across the globe are holding protests. Be part of those protests. Join those protests. Follow these Amara organizations on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, so you can see what kind of work that they're doing. They are doing a lot of work. IAM is doing a lot of work. Be part of this movement. In addition, for those of us who live in in Western democracies, be active in the democratic process. Use this opportunity. Many of us here in the West, we take for advantage oftentimes the democratic system that we live in. And we all say we want democracy in our home country. So if we want that, use this system, use this process. Amara organizations are active in contacting their members of parliament. They're very active in contacting their members of Congress, their foreign ministry offices, their State Department officials. We're very active in doing that. I mean, a few weeks ago, we had an event hosting the special envoy for the Horn of Africa, Ambassador Michael Hammer, in Los Angeles. That didn't happen by accident. It's because we are actively engaging with the State Department to educate, to influence policy. Excuse me. We know what's best for Amaras. Why? We are Amaras. We know what's best for us. We know what's best for our families. We know what's best for our community in Ethiopia. So we should be actively engaged in the US policy, United Nations policy, Canadian policy, British policy, European policy, Australian foreign policy that affects our people in Ethiopia. It is our obligation. It is not something that we can neglect or that we can ignore. We all have families there that we love, that we care about dearly. And if we are active, we can have an impact in that policy. There's not a legislation that gets introduced in the US Congress without Amara organizations knowing about it or having an active participation in it. Even on legislation that we did not endorse, we had our hand in it. So it is imperative for you to be active. Call your members of parliament, call your members of Congress. Be active in contacting your representatives. It does make a difference. Democracy is slow. It is not, it doesn't happen overnight, but if you do it over and over and over again, you will make a difference. It is one way that you can contribute. For those who are, who have the capacity and the ability, you can communicate, you can contact the, international institutions such as the United Nations or the African Union. It is not an impossibility. It is being done. In February, AAA working with the Center for Human Rights, a human rights organization at the University of Pretoria, filed a legal complaint with the African Union, claiming that there is a genocide being perpetrated against the Amhara people in Oromia. This was a huge thing for us. It was monumental, filing a legal complaint, with an international institution. Earlier this year, in front of the when the United Nations Human Rights Council at the hearing, we made an intervention about what was happening to Amaras in Ethiopia. Why? Because we're engaged. It's not an impossibility. We can engage with these international institutions. We are contributing to the investigation of atrocities with the United Nations independent investigators in Ethiopia. We're providing information. Many Amara organizations are doing that. So that's not an impossibility. It's not far away. We are working very closely with many international human rights organizations. You can be part of that. If this is of your interest, join the Amara organizations who are working on these issues. You can contribute to that. A few years ago, there was a time when we used to, when for Amaras, it was challenging to get to get our issues in Western media. Are we not doing it now? In a very short period of time, you will see Amara organizations being quoted and Amara leaders on the New York Times, Washington Post, Washington Journal, Al Jazeera are appearing and talking about our issues. The time, the days and time where other people control our narrative is over. Because of people like Abel Balau, Haptamu, Menelacho, Getacho, Bayena here of Magra Media, we are able to control finally our own narrative in our own language, where before we did not. No longer can other people put about our own perception to the world about us. When it comes to the Western media, we're very active. We are at the forefront of talking about us. This is who we are. We are not going to let other people, control the narrative about Amaras. We're doing that now. So we need you to be active and be engaged. I'll just give you a quick number, something that our team did, at the tail end of last year. In 2022 alone, AAA was either quoted or appeared on, Western media over 33 times. 33 times. That's Al Jazeera, New York Times, Washington Post, Reuters. That is significant. Where a few years ago, that was not possible. So we're able to put our issues out there to the international community. And as we have more and more people joining the Amara movement, we're going to be able to do that more. The way you destroy a people is when you make them, when you have them, when you make them when you put them to the point where they cannot speak for themselves, the inability for themselves to speak for themselves. But that's no longer happening. We're speaking for ourselves very loud. It's not happening in Amharic and English right now. But now with our Amara organizations in Europe becoming more powerful, we're seeing the protests in Germany. We're seeing the protests in the UK. We're seeing the protests in France and in Italy. And now Amaras are now starting to become influential in those European languages. We are having an impact. So it is natural. It is a natural order as Amaras come together, bring the resources together in a unified manner. It is natural for us to get back into our home, Menelik's palace. That's the goal of the Amhara movement. That's why we are organizing. Because we understand now what happens when we give up that palace to someone else, to someone who sees us as an enemy, to organizations, movements that see us as an enemy, that want to annihilate us, that want to destroy everything our ancestors had established, had created, the things that we are proud of. I have no choice but to fight for that because it's about me. It's about my children. It's about the grandchildren that I will have. And for all of us, it's something that I care about deeply. And all of us should feel that way. So that's why in the face of all these atrocities that are happening to our people, I'm very optimistic because our base is broadening, our base is growing. More and more people are joining this Amara movement. this Amara movement is a diverse movement. It encompasses the diversity of all of our people. It encompasses the diversity of all of our regions, our religion, every part of who we are. We are a unique people. When that uniqueness is being attacked, we shouldn't remain silent. We should be in active mode and take action. So I implore you, I am asking you, be part of this movement, join it. We're making a difference. We are going to make sure that real justice comes to our people, and that only can happen with your engagement, with your involvement. And please support these Amara organizations. Join us. Thank you.
I love the